Welcome back. How you guys doing? You can all hear
Great.
me?
I'm doing good, yeah.
How are you feeling about everything?
I'm doing great. Nathan, we can see your screen, but we cannot see your beautiful face.
Oh, there we go.
There you are. This is the casual part of the show. Is everyone breathing all right? Feeling relaxed? Good. This is my favorite part. As a design practitioner, I know that the feedback loop to the design process is the most important part. That is why this competition is designed the way it is, because we know that without feedback, we will not be as successful as we would without it. So we build this in intentionally. So the judges have been helping you form your work, and you've had very little opportunity to speak back to them and ask them deeper questions about your work or their work. So we think it's important that you have this opportunity to dialogue back and forth. And it's been a really enriching part of the project for us, because we learn more about each other and we build our own relationships. I was overhearing, not really, but noticing the students talking amongst themselves as we were waiting for breaks and lunches and deliberations. And if we were in real life, you would have gone to dinners together, and you would have spent more time together, and you would have exchanged emails, and you would have maybe found ways to stay connected over time, and you should do that. Please reach out to each other. I already noticed somebody checked into my LinkedIn. Thank you very much. I will accept that. We want to stay connected with you, and we hope you stay connected with each other, because we really, really care and really want to see how you take this experience forward in your careers, whether it's this project specifically or other ways you understand what collaboration means in the world, what circular economy means in your careers. We really care, and we really want to see how you take that path forward. So this is a time for building that relationship, and the judges are the same way. They're interested in where you go and what you do, and it's exciting when you come back. And I also want to say a big shout out to our KBO team, who's been working the tech in the back room. It takes 13 computers to run this show. I haven't even started to count the lights. There's way too many. And cameras. And we know that we had some challenges with internet, and we did pretty well. Dennis has been in and out a little bit, and he's out right now, but we think he'll come back. We're hoping he comes back. So there's been some in and out. But mostly, this has been a really seamless, Dennis is back, yay. Really seamless production. And that's great learning for us, because we took risk to try a new thing, and we're learning along the way. So yay to KBO and his crew to making this thing just a great experience for us. And always a shout out to the judges who've been with you all the way. And thank you for taking heed to what they suggested. You wouldn't be here today if you hadn't, I'm quite sure. Because it's been 7 years and I've been leaning in and listening, and I've noticed that those teams that don't listen and take heed to the critique of the judges along the way don't usually make it to the finals. That's kind of a thing. And you notice that they go and do their homework too. So if they haven't really done a whole lot of work in some of the areas that you guys are doing a whole lot of work, they kind of go and dig around and kind of study that too. So you put us to the test as well. So I think that makes it fun for everybody. I'm just wanting to give a little introduction that way, not only for you to give some time to think through some questions, because teachers know that you guys need time to think about your questions, but also to give the audience a little sense of why we do this kind of judges forum for that feedback loop. The judges also get to ask questions back and forth and give some more feedback if you wanted about how they came to the decisions they did, because it wasn't easy. I'm very sure it wasn't easy.
It wasn't.
And they've been thinking about it for the same 9 months that you've been thinking about it. So it's been on their mind. Does somebody want to start with a question? Because if you aren't quite ready, I have some questions that have already come in from the internet world. And thank you for the people that are listening in. You're welcome to send in a question. We have some folks who will ask them. So if you have a question, please start. I would normally be dancing around a room, holding a microphone, coming to you, but I don't have to do that today. So. Who might have a question? All right, am I going to go then? I'm going to go. This was a question that came from an outside observer, and this is going to the student participants. A person is asking, could you describe, any of you, and I point this way for the folks who don't know, my screen on this side has all the students in front of me. How competing in the Wege Prize has changed you personally in your career trajectory, or how has it affected your life studies and career prospects? Can anyone speak to that kind of question?
I guess I'll
Sarah,
go with nobody
go ahead,
else's,
Sarah.
but yeah, I guess for me, like the Wege Prize was my introduction to the concept of a circular economy. And that was really, really valuable for me because it's something that I think like I want to emphasize. It's really important for the earth, really. So it's something that has changed the way that I fundamentally think about new and emerging technologies. So I think it's something that I can apply like moving forward in my life and my studies as well. But as for like me and my project specifically, I think this whole process has been so valuable in helping us develop our business model because we came out of, I guess, like a more science heavy competition. So we had a lot of like laboratory prototyping done, but we didn't really know, I guess, how to step foot into the business market. So having that kind of like iterative feedback with the judges where they would tell us like where they thought the issues were, and then we would try to address those for the next submission. I think it was a really valuable process.
Great, and for your project specifically, you've been working on it a while with one kind of focus, and then to be introduced to circular economy and having to reshift that was a big difference, right? So that's great. And I saw Margot, she was starting to chime in. Her little screen lit up.
Yeah, thank you, Gail. So a lot of my college career has been based around the circular economy and all that good stuff. So I'm still on the same trajectory as before, but one of my main takeaways was really based around the teamwork that we managed to have in Further Food. This was just one of the best teams I've ever been in. And we all started, I mean, there's 3 family members in it, and then the other 2 are coworkers. And to be able to experience that sort of relationship was really incredible. And I feel like it goes to show me that the team building is so important, and to be able to do that groundwork. And teams are hard. They are hard, and it's going to be messy. And it just really showed me how important that teamwork in the beginning is. And so going forward, I know that I'm just going to be giving it my 100% all towards the teamwork at any next team group thing I have. So I'm just so grateful for this experience because it really showed me that. And thank you to my team.
Can I build on that, Margot, and ask a question of Pellet and Elias? Elias, I noticed you are from Trinity College, and you have colleagues from Earth University, which I've had the pleasure to visit, and Asia University. And how do you guys all know each other?
That's a good question. So I first met Nadine because we were selected in a similar program, a GAPRA program that we attended before we went to college. So I knew her from that program. And then I met Jean-Claude, who goes to Earth University in 2017 when he came to Trinity College to visit his friend. And then we had a conversation. He told me that he's studying agricultural science and I was doing engineering. And we actually talked about this project in deep. And yeah, we decided that we're going to work together because we seemed like we shared the same passion. And from there, I met Eric, who goes to the same university as Jean-Claude, whom I had not met before. But he was friends with Jean-Claude. And then Jean-Claude was also friends with theonist who goes to HSU University in Ghana. So then that time we got to connect together, but it was great to see how we connected so easily, given that we're in different locations and some of them, had not met before, but we connected so quickly and we started working together and it became a very strong team.
That's an important story to share because so many students are struggling with how to find a team. And we've heard many stories over 7 years. And that was really helpful that other students will be able to know that story. But Emmanuel, could you share your story? How did you build your team?
Okay, I went to the same secondary school with Emmanuel Kwesiata, the same high school. So from there, we have been friends, and the most interesting aspect is we all had our first degree from the same university, that is University of Cape Coast. And I did the same program with the only lady among us, Agnes Omangbo Higan, who is in Wageningen University of Research. We did the same agriculture. And I'm on the same project with the PhD student, Zikir Shaibu. And I served in the same department, the soil science department, with Apollo Samuel. And from there, we stay connected, and we've also published some papers together. So that's how come we met.
Nice. Often there is a connection to high school. And I think that's really important that people think back to their good friends that they made in high school that have gone off to other universities and how you can reconnect and build those teams. Diversity is so important. Diversity is important in ecosystems. Diversity is important in real life. And that's why we built that into this competition. Maybe the judges might like to speak to that, but first I'd like Dennis to give a sense of how he built his team, because you're a returning winner. And how would you like to share how you built your team, Dennis?
Maybe before I even get into how we built the team, I do want to acknowledge the judges. Every time we come to the Wege Prize, it's really exciting to see the perspective and to see how comprehensive the judges' feedback is. They have a certain kind of approach to the solutions that we bring on board, and they assess them in depth. When we were here last year, it was really nice interacting with the judges, and I think it's very unfortunate that this year we don't get to sit with them on the same table to have this physical interaction. Their feedback is really, really, really interesting, and it makes you rethink your way, and it gives you a different perspective to how you're going to build the solution. I'm really grateful for coming here every year. I'm really excited to listen to the judges on how they're going to, assess our solutions. Thank you very much, judges. Yeah, so our team really, just like from last year, we continued with my colleague Mark, and we went on to pick our colleagues who are working and had knowledge on the solution that we built this year. So our colleagues were really interested in how circular economy, because like we told you last year, is that issues regarding the circular economy are not a common thing back home. It's not a topic that we talk about in school or anywhere we're at. So when we approached them and they had a really good concept, we made up a team and started to brainstorm about how we can approach and make it, more circular and bring it on board to the Wege Prize. Yeah. So most of my colleagues are colleagues from high school. About 2 of them, we studied together in high school, and we continue to interact through the course of the university, knowing what each of us is studying. Yeah, and we're not very new to each other.
Wonderful, thank you. All right, now who has a question to share to the judges?
Okay. I want to ask something that's kind of specific to my project.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Sure.
Yeah. I guess I just wanted to ask, what you think is, the biggest factor that's holding us back? What do you think is, the weakest link of our project? And how could we improve on it?
Yeah, I don't think so. That's a fantastic question. To me, the framing is maybe I would flip it around and say your greatest challenge, because I don't think I can perceive anything that you've done as weakness. I think that the biggest challenge you have is that you've defined large, growing, because you have extra development you want to do aside from the first step. A solution that takes a lot of investment and takes a lot of coordination with other entities, other partners. So I think your biggest challenge is managing all of those partners, and in the context of developing a new technology, you're developing a new process, and none of that is ever easy. But I don't think I perceive anything that you've done as weakness.
Okay.
Add on to that, I think your greatest challenge going forward is to define what success means for you. Because sometimes if you feel passionately that the idea as you've constructed it and the way that you've framed the solution is worth doing, it might be the best solution to put it out there in a company's hands and let them run with it, you know? Or it might be something that you care so passionately about doing that you want to create a company and actually maintain control over how that idea gets put in place. And so I think when you have an elegant solution, when you have an idea, to take it to the next step, you really have to think about, you know, what form and how you want to be involved in the idea, and make sure that that's kind of at the heart of how you take it forward. Because, for example, if you want to take complete control over it, it might be a longer game, you know, it might be like something that you dedicate your professional career to, and that may be something that's very exciting to you. On the other hand, if you want to just kind of put that idea out there and then pursue maybe, you know, do a PhD or do something else, or just carry on, then you might think about partnerships and other people that could take that idea, but you have to relinquish a little bit of control in doing so. So I think kind of at this stage, what strikes me is that your idea is elegantly constructed as a kind of perfect world, but in then putting it into practice, it'll get messy in terms of how it gets taken up, where are you in that process, how committed are you to being the front runner to take it forward, because it's very compelling and I'm sure it will get adopted. So I think that for me is the challenge in front of you.
Okay. Thank you.
Mike looks ready to add on.
I don't have anything to add. I thought that both Nathan and Alicia encapsulated it really well.
Thank you.
Anybody else come up with a good question?
Yeah, I do have a question for the judges, and in particular, yeah, I do want to ask the judge Alicia and maybe Carter to give me a little bit of insight. Last year when we came around, I did talk to Alicia about bioplastics, and she was doing a lot of work on it. And I do want to know from her, when she looks at our product, and maybe she knows something about its trajectory and how far we can go with this in terms of taking it from the lab or design stage and trying to make it an actual product. Then from Carter to try and know, most of his feedback was related to how the product looks, how is it packaged, is it appealing to, to the consumer, and I want to insight on that. How can we push this? I know that we may have been the best, but there are issues here and there that we may not have been able to present and really show you that we're the best.
Yeah, so I mean, to say one thing is that I think we should continue the conversation after this forum, and I would like to work with you guys ongoing to make sure that your idea really comes to life in the way that you envision. So please keep in touch, and I'm happy to set up a call as well to dig into some detail. But because often I think these conversations are best with a bit of further research, and then you come back and then you develop it further. So having said that, one big challenge that I think would be worth you guys experimenting a lot with is different processing methods. So I was very encouraged to see in your proposal that you had some proposals around like different thermopresses and different equipment that you think you can repurpose for creating packaging. And I would suggest that there, with bioplastics, there are numerous ways that you can alter the recipe to make its processability like match your application of interest. So for example, if you want something that's very moldable, you'll need to tweak the amount of thermoplastic or this binder in this case, or the amount of infill in terms of fiber. So you're going to have to maybe, I guess, experiment with the recipe proportions in order to make its processing suit your application of need. So that's an area that I think would require a lot of experimentation. And there's some really good examples in the literature I think you can also draw on. And I'd be more than happy to kind of help on a practical level to narrow in on that for you.
Well, that's a gift. Thank you. Those of you listening in are probably noticing that there's more to the products of these students' work than the 10-minute presentation, because Alicia's alluding to proposals. So the documentation that goes behind the scenes is a little more rigorous than the 10-minute presentation, right, team? And they're smiling, so it's true. So that is all weighted in the way that decisions are made about who's coming in on top. So that's part of the process as well. Margot had a question. She was leaning in. Do you want to? Oh, I'm sorry, Christopher. Did you want to?
Yeah, I thought he wanted the second part. Wanted to add to that is once you've done your tweaking and then you've come up with the products or whatever you've decided that you want to utilize, then there is it's almost like the branding of what it is that you get and how that's designed and how that reaches out to the people that you're trying, your audience, who it is that you're trying to sell this to, who it is going to use this, and how that you're going to implement that in such a way that it makes it palatable or hip per se, so that you're bringing it out of being, something that is, it's just, a dry, sometimes some people may consider it a dry circular piece of material of some sort, and then how you excite people to want to use it and want to implement it and go, hey, have you heard about this? And how that takes form is, is contingent on the region, the people, and also the processes that you put into it. And then in full, it's how you describe that to let other people know how this was created and why this is such a good thing. And that's where the sort of the other component of getting your materials out there and accepted in the marketplace. So that's just what I wanted to add on that in terms of that.
Brilliant.
Thank you very much.
Okay, now Margot's got a question.
Thank you. So I have a question in terms of what challenges the Further Food proposal. So a lot of my expertise would be in the university setting. And moving forward with the project, of course, we're hoping to expand it outside of universities and have it be applicable in, different corporation settings, larger restaurants. And I was just wondering what the judges think about the next steps would be working outside of the university with our proposal.
Got some thoughts there. Google, for example, operates in 60 countries and more than 150 cities, office buildings, and the food team that we have has looked and studied this at extraordinary length, and we've published papers as well on our food program. One of the things...
We lost your sound.
On mute, Michael.
Oop, sorry. One of the things that I think that will carry your solution forward will be to have your dining services organization start to integrate this into their own processes and to have them own it. Not for you to be an outside party trying to influence in, but that this literally becomes part of their DNA for how they, one, reduce food waste, because reducing food waste, the most sustainable thing is to not overproduce food, although we know that that's not always possible. So developing, I know it sounds like they have a menu management system that allows them to predict volumes, and so that's one step. But there's also the pre-consumer production food waste is something where there's a lot of opportunity for them probably to refine how they cut, what they keep, how they weigh it, and that and then those so there's a waste stream there that's somewhat unavoidable just in the preparation of food. And then what happens with that? And I think what your solution had focused on was once the food is prepared, making sure that it doesn't go to waste. And to have your dining services program own that and operate it and to integrate it into their business is going to what is going to sustain it when you take the next big head of circularity for another company and move on, right? Because I think all of you are moving forward with this passion that eventually you may end up there if that's really what you want in your career. So be thinking about how can it perpetuate without you there, and maybe that means tag teaming with your head of sustainability to integrate it to create momentum to having establishing the relationships and have he or she influence the dining services organization to integrate your project and then to quantify the not just the environmental savings but the economic opportunity as well. Google's publishing things, and there are other organizations that are doing this, not just because it's the right thing, but it also supports the economics of the system too. Then I would say, in terms of like going external, that's where first you always get your house in order wherever your house is, and then you start to become a model. You start learning and refining, and maybe that program is replicable. Maybe it's monetizable, maybe it's not, maybe it's just you spreading that in throughout the university ecosystem, and the impact could be huge. Is that helpful?
Yeah, thank you.
Could I ask a follow-up question? I
wanted to ask a question.
On behalf of a consumer of food, which is obvious. I know that you're not the first team to talk about issues around food and food security. Often health departments come into this equation. And when we're talking about systems thinking, I think it's important to bring as many stakeholders into that conversation as possible. Michael, how would you imagine she could bring in health department expertise to kind of help overcome some of those barriers, hurdles, walls that are usually the issues around food safety?
Oh, I mean, you're bringing up such a phenomenal point,
Okay,
and that
good.
is as you expand in thinking about getting this as a standard program at the university, working with your dining services organization, which will have the relationships with the health department, likely SOPs and standards related to food preparation, storage, sanitation, that kind of stuff, will be where you're going to have to get really, really knowledgeable quickly. Because, for example, things like seafood are generally of a higher risk category that people don't want to start keeping those on the shelves for a longer period of time. And so you will figure out what portions of the menu you might be able to resell or to offer for sale or offer to university students. So expanding your network first, I think, through your dining services organization, and come up with your stakeholder map of who are the operations people, maybe even the cooks or cooks, some cohort of individuals that could help you understand and appreciate the complexity of their world. And when you start to understand and appreciate their complexity, that'll help you continue to craft and hone your solution.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think the one who's put in the most demanding position to respond to the idea is the one who wants to be part of the idea of fixing it.
I would add to this that you're working with Aramark already, right?
Right, we have communications with them.
Yeah, so I would use your university as you build out and expand. I would use your university as a customer of Aramark, sort of as your advocate, and make it their goal to figure out how to do this university-wide. But you can take the same strategy that Google's using with their food service provider, which I think is Compass, which is once they have that figured out, and Compass in their case, or in your case, Aramark is delivering that solution. And by the way, Michael's right, then it's really Aramark's solution. You're training Aramark how to do this. But the moment Aramark is able to provide this to your university, then you could just go out and tell the world that you've accomplished this thing and suggest to every one of Aramark's other customers to ask them for this too, because they already know how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Yeah,
it
this
blows
is
up,
Really good. This makes sense.
right? So now it blows up and it's all over, right? Game done.
Hey, can I add a thing? I was thinking during your presentation, I think there was a couple of comments on our judges chat where it might be worth thinking what kind of menu items are best for being repurposed, and actually, close the circle on what kind of food would be best to offer. Like, for example, maybe I'm just thinking out loud, but like food that hasn't been super processed already, because then it could be cooked again without it being like overcooked or something, or kind of food that has doesn't break down as easily, or that kind of thing. So I could imagine rejigging the menu in order to make the leftovers more useful would be kind of a cool direction to take it, and maybe opens up possibilities. And then the last thing is just a kind of fun thing to put out there. There was some comments on your packaging. Unavoidable food waste, like waste peels and a lot of peels, actually, like different fruits, different beans and legumes and stuff like that, all of the kind of offcuts of all of that. That's often very, very good input for bioplastics and biocomposites that can actually be made into packaging. So if you might want to have a chat with Haya Bioplastics, as well as just for the fun of it, is to play around a little bit with how you could actually make your packaging come from the actual unavoidable food waste that will be in your supply chain.
So is that what you guys were thinking of with the packaging when you guys made comments?
Not directly. That was just a kind of idea out of the blue. But the packaging, I think, was a question around the plastics, specifically the window. That was at least one of the directions that we were taking that question in, is whether that window was
Compostable.
Was compostable. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Okay.
Or
good.
reusable. Like I think Michael brought it up, is why not the reusable? But I think you already kind of answered that question. But
Okay, I like that. Two teams working together now to build on each other's ideas. Now we got something new going on. I like that.
If I may continue to pile on a little bit, I had asked Margot how would you define success, and it was a bit vague. And I guess what I had in my mind was, if the program is wildly successful and you sell a lot of the residual food that's left over, in some ways, I was thinking success would be to have zero waste, but not to grow revenue year over year through that channel, because you never want to optimize your system to generate revenue from the waste. You don't want to produce more waste because you may generate revenue through it. And I don't know how that impacts your solution, but maybe you're thinking, okay, if you are wildly successful and all of the food is gone, that's a good thing. And maybe success is not a year over year revenue generating stream as much as it is just a value recovery. And if you recover 100%, then that's great.
Yeah, because if you're reducing cost, that's okay.
And you're tuning both sides of what you're producing and what's left over.
Looks like Emmanuel has a question. No? Elias, you have a question?
I do.
Okay.
So my question is not that specific, and it is about implementation for our project. So I was wondering if any of the judges have a specific piece of advice for Pettit group.
well, I could expand a little bit on what I brought up about, I guess, when I was talking about the creative solutions that you had through your picking up and your supply chain and whatnot. I just couldn't help but think that it could, use opportunity to get your your solution of pellet out there through the methods that you are using through picking things up, because it's kind of like, the average person probably wouldn't know what's going on, right? And they're not going to see what's really happening, but they will see your vehicles. They will see what's happening with that. And I thought that it's almost kind of an integral part. I'm reminded of I now live in Miami, and so we have a serious issue with growth of the palm trees and basically the agricultural refuse that is around our streets. So they've created, it's an odd looking truck. I wish I had a picture of it, which is, it's like a garbage truck on one end. And then it's like the arm it's got a claw on the other end. And that zips around these streets every other week, and it picks up whatever leaves out in their yards. And because we have such a tropical environment of leaves and palm leaves and whatnot, which are quite large. And so they've created their own vehicle, which I've never seen anywhere else in our country, that zips around and picks this stuff up. And it looks like it's going backwards down the street. I've seen it, and I'm like, what's going on? It really shocked me. And I started talking to other people about it, and it's, to them, it's just like, oh yeah, that's how we pick up our stuff out here, And so when I saw your vehicle, the modifications on yours, I thought it just seemed to lend itself to awareness of what it is that you're doing and the good that it's doing. And so that was one thing that I wanted to bring up about your project in particular. So
one suggestion on a similar note is that in order to get adoption of people sorting waste, which I know was a component of your model that needed to work, like for people to actually sort their food waste and give it to you, maybe would be to talk with the farmers who are making produce with your fertilizer, and actually have some labeling of the produce that would say that it's made with household food waste from your area or from your town or something, to give the consumer of that product, of that, whether it's, whatever foodstuff that they're actually consuming or buying in the market, they give a sense that they actually contributed to the growing of that through the offering of their food waste. I think that would create a feedback in people's minds that they're actually part of the cycle of the food that they're actually consuming, and they're doing a good thing by being part of that. And it just may, close the loop in terms of people's minds and make them feel part of something bigger, and create a reinforcing cycle of adoption and involvement.
Yeah, I would really second that, because throughout your proposal, you were, really clear about the functional benefits and the financial benefits of your solution. And this actually goes for all of the teams here. But in this team, particularly with Pellet, I think that there's an opportunity to engage people on an emotional level, on a meaningful level. What they're doing isn't just, beneficial economically and functionally. Every step of the way, when they participate with your solution, they're building a better, healthier Rwanda. And I think that needs to be part of your messaging. It needs to be instantly recognizable, like Alicia said, on the packaging or on the trucks or throughout the process. Anytime a citizen, comes into contact with what you're doing, they should be reminded that you're building a healthier, better Rwanda, and it should be instantaneous. Because I think that change is really hard, and behavioral change is the most difficult kind of change. But if you engage people on that level, there will be people who are only convinced by the economics, or only convinced by, functionally how easy it is to implement. But you will ultimately convince more people to change their behavior and keep their behavior changed longer if they're engaged on those levels. And so I see that as a real opportunity for you in particular, but really for all of the groups here.
Yeah, and just to celebrate and build on that, education And on all of your projects have an opportunity to teach other people about the value of what you bring to the world that you're working in. And I want to applaud, I think Team Biochar was looking at the millennial goals, right? You put those out there. That was part of your goal.
Yes, yeah.
Thank you very much. All of you, whether you speak to that directly or not, are working on millennial goals. And those millennial goals speak to how do we educate others. Whether it's informally or formally, it doesn't really matter. So please work that into your strategies for all that you do and help the consumer understand that the value that you're bringing through your projects and your products need to be understood. So thank you, Nathan, for bringing that up.
One thing I'd like to make a point of with biochar actually is that I think it would be very powerful to relate waste, in your case, in the pineapple waste, as being a valuable thing, because I think that's one of the main points of circular economic thinking is that waste equals food in the system, so that waste ceases to become something that we view as, undesirable, right? And so from your perspective, with the pineapple waste, you have an incredible opportunity to maybe work with the farmers of pineapple and actually say, all of this waste is incredibly valuable because we're making biochar out of it, and engage them in the idea that they're not producing waste that's problematic. They're producing a value stream. And so changing that perspective, I think, is a little bit of a deeper level than just saying we can do something useful with your waste, but rather what we're saying is that waste has ceased to exist as a concept in the system. Rather, we actually view it as food, as nutrients. And so that can be a tool of engagement, I think, that can bring more people on board because they feel like they're actually producing something of value instead of feeling something that, it's kind of a guilty thing that they're impacting, but they don't really want to pay attention or et cetera. So it can flip the psychology nicely.
Right. We often remind students that how you frame your storytelling matters. Nathan teaches me this a lot, and I'm getting a lot of nodding heads. You guys are framing your storytelling very well. Today you framed it very well. But when you talk about waste equals food, and now there's no waste, and it's all value, then that just shifts how people think right away, right? So thank you, Alicia, that's very important. Another question for the judges. Dennis.
Yeah, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, biochar is a new form that is attracting a lot of attention, and the spreading of the news is not all that going very fast because of the lack of knowledge and the science behind it. So, I'm just trying to ask, the way that we can, you can help us to, or in order to reach out to people to really appreciate what the biochar is, because as we said in our project, we are targeting most of the farmers, and they don't have much article education on biochar. So convincing them becomes a problem for us.
Well, I think Mike did some interesting research about biochar and actually enlightened some of us that it's been around for hundreds of years. So there may be something to be said that it's not necessarily a new technology, but it's new to you. It's being used now, almost like rediscovered in a way. So it might sort of, in a way, it's not, you're not actually attacking it with a high tech approach. You're attacking this through hundreds of years of knowledge and now implementing it in the region that you're in. So maybe Mike can speak more.
This dates back to what they've been doing in China and in the Amazon. And while the composition of the Amazon case is going back hundreds of years, but my understanding, very limited understanding, is that biochar as a material can take has different compositions depending on the process and the starting material. You might consider partnering with organizations that these farmers are connected with, maybe even with Elias and the pellet solution, because it can be an amendment, an additive to compost that might offer an even richer solution over synthetic fertilizers. So I think this becomes a strategic question of how could you come together with an organization that has an understanding of the market and the relationships. That's really important. The relationships with the farmers that can help build trust, and you can start to experiment with a group of farmers, and start to show results that your biochar is actually benefiting the local soil and ecosystem.
I'd recommend as well maybe creating a partnership with a local farmer's field, or having your own in-house test site where you could grow a series of crops with different compositions and actually give the farmers a bit of agency as well. So for example, if you want to have a composition that's more suited for this type of yield or this type of crop, then here, come view what we're growing with this, and then invite them to just discover what it looks like in practice. And just kind of the best way of teaching people is to do it, get them involved in actually helping with the production process, and have a little test site to bring it to life.
Okay, thank you.
And I know Dennis has a question. I think I see his hand up. Go ahead.
I just wanted to. I'm just wondering if Colin Webster is still here.
I'm sorry, he had to step away. But if you ask the question, we will find him, and I'll get it back to you, the answer. So go ahead and ask the question, and we'll circle back later.
Okay, so we have seen different organizations trying to build bioplastics, and it's been supported by the MacArthur Foundation, like the example of an Asian farm that was trying to build edible packaging from seaweed. And they were really provided with a great platform to learn more and expose themselves to try and build their product better and better each day. I don't know how it's possible, because we're about two groups here trying to do bioplastics. How can we learn the exposure that the foundation gives to other organizations?
Okay, we'll get that question to Colin, and we'll make sure you get that answer. Thank you. Go ahead, Sarah.
I have a question. I guess this is more of like a big, broad question, but I guess I was just wondering if you guys could elaborate a little bit more on how you guys came to your decision today in the context of this competition here.
Well, one thing just to reflect the decision-making process was the difficulty of it. All of the teams are very strong in different ways. So I just wanted to make the point that I don't think the decision was made on specific deficiencies or problems in anyone's proposal and solution. At the end of the day, we had to make a decision, basically. So it just make sure that that all 5 teams in our minds were very, very strong this year, and it was a difficult decision to make.
There's if you track back the discussion, there's so many issues that we were considering, and I'm going to list some of them here, but by no means am I going to be complete or exhaustive here. The first and foremost, is this a circular project, or how circular is the project? And all of your teams satisfy that. In the very early days, we got a very small percentage of projects who were really actually circular, because, like you said earlier, most people had never heard of circular economy. So we would get a whole bunch of projects that were sustainable by all means, but really weren't circular. So we look really hard at how circular the projects are. One of the things that we look at is we look for prototyping, or and especially over even proof of concepts, but are there tests being run in development right now? Or is there data coming back from, quote unquote, the field, or is this still just planned and more hypothetical? We look at, the potential for impact, not just within the project itself, but assuming that project has become successful, how much is it going to impact further actions by others? We look at, our biggest, criteria isn't about the finances. We want things to be realistic, but we're not looking for the greatest profit or the greatest outcome necessarily. But we do look at, have the figures that have been provided to us, do they make sense? Have they thought of the real numbers and the real costs associated with either expenses or revenues? We look for longevity. That said, that if it's a project that forms a new standard that that gets adopted widely, that doesn't mean that maybe it's a good thing for the project to go away if it becomes a new standard. So all of these things are pretty dynamic, but those are just 4 or 5 of the criteria. I'm blanking on some of the rest of the conversations that we've had. But we're looking, in general, we're looking for reality and feasibility, circularity, and some evidence that it's working already in practice.
Christopher, you're muted if you're talking.
Sorry. And also, just like they sometimes, if we're hit with something we've never heard before, sometimes we get some repeats, but then through those repeats, we're seeing how some people are much more successful and have sort of closed the loop better than others. And sometimes, I think we do think of the general impact of that wicked problem, the need as well. I mean, I think I sometimes think of that. It's sometimes that factors into it, personally speaking.
Yeah, I would just reiterate that, other people listening into this may not really understand how much work all your teams have done to get to this point. There's been, 3 or 4 rounds of reviews, of critique, of feedback, et cetera, to get here. I don't think that any of the 5 of the teams that we're talking about right now could possibly be seen as a failure or not worthy of being where you are, because of you've largely satisfied all of those criteria already. I think as a whole, with all of the submissions, we're really proud of the 5 that ended up being on the top and getting this far. And there were some great ideas in the others as well, but we felt that these were the ones that were the most viable, the most imaginative, the most researched and developed, and the ones with the greatest capacity for impact.
And this is where I like to remind those that didn't make it to the finals that next year is the year to try again. In design, if you're not trying again, if you're quick to give up, then that's too bad. The design is built to try again. And so if you're listening in and you were one of the teams that didn't make it to the finals, try again, because you might make it next year.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Dare ya.
Dennis is an example of that, right?
Right. Dennis,
yep.
Go.
Mm-hmm.
We have about 7 minutes left. Do you have any burning questions? Because I have one more I could ask the students. Can I ask a student question? This goes for all of you. We're interested to know, in this process, for some of you, maybe your first step into a global competition, what about this process has been surprising, illuminating, and very valuable to you in your work moving forward? Okay, Dennis is ready to go. His light's flashing. You want to go first, Dennis? No.
I want to apologize. I lost you a bit there.
You want me to say it again?
Yes, please.
My question is, what in this process, in this global design competition, has been most surprising, illuminating, and valuable?
Oh, yes, thank you for that question. Coming here once again, I did look at the work that the teams we came with in the finals, and I came to notice that this year and this time around, there's a lot of focus on and a lot of biomaterials. We're dealing with food waste, we're dealing with bioplastics, and basically all of us are around plant science, and this is quite interesting. Though it does surprise me, and I do feel that the scope of the competition is a bit narrower, since all the teams are particularly in one field. I do want to wonder if there are other ways the competition can explore other fields, maybe in water. Like last year we did water, and I think we were the only ones in a really long time. Maybe any other field, machines, something a bit diverse, and because this year we are all bio-based people, I could say.
I'll let the
And
judges answer that question.
I'll weigh in there.
It's both a question and a comment, actually.
Yeah, well, I think there's a response. Go, Michael.
Yeah, I actually wrote a note here that exactly to this point of each finalist team really focusing in around agriculture in some way, whether it's composting or taking in agricultural feedstock and processing it. What I think I've noticed over the last 7 years is that the biological system is something that students that submit to the competition are comfortable with. I've noticed that at times it also depends on the students' education or their focus. So in past years, we've seen submissions in furniture due to Kendall College of Art and Design. But consistently, there is this connection to the natural world of trying to find ways of eliminating food waste or processing waste or looking at agricultural products. When you get into the technical world, the technical materials, things like electronics or other tough devices, or you get into materials development, and I know we've got high bioplastics, you start to require a level of knowledge and expertise in science, engineering, economics, systems development that gets quite complex. And I think that complexity and or experience has shaped people or has shifted people into a more familiar space. This is just my hypothesis and observation, but it would be very difficult for, I think, a team to submit something around a new molecule, for example, and talk about how to scale that up across the world, commercial scale with a $200 million manufacturing facility and battling global commodities. It gets really complicated really fast. And additionally, we've seen some submissions in the past around data and information to try to use sensors to support a circular economy. And I think this next decade is going to be a decade of technological revolution around a circular economy where data and information, machine learning, artificial intelligence, I think are really going to define the next 10 years. But I think it's really hard in a competition like this to develop all of that, particularly with undergraduate and graduate students. It doesn't mean that somebody might not come along and really wow us in the competition in some future year. I think it's just been a lot more difficult for students to take on those kinds of projects.
I'd like to add to that theme a bit. So what I find actually very inspiring about the submissions this year, and also a good percentage in previous years, is the focus on biological systems and ecological systems from a material standpoint of understanding how we can be part of biological systems is encouraging in two ways. One is that it's flipping this idea that humans have to be a degrading force of nature, that we can actually be a positive part of natural ecosystems. And so I think it's a very powerful message that is actually not that often present in circular economy discourse, specifically in the business world and definitely in the research world. It's dominated by technical materials in terms of research and practice. If you look at most circular economy research in the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and other academic institutions, and certainly in the kind of business adoption world, it's all about mostly technical materials. So I think it's very encouraging to see how a more decentralized grassroots competition that is allowing students who know their own environment and know their own resources around them are coming up with solutions that are more in touch with their own local ecology. And so I think that what you're bringing to the table is actually a missing piece of the puzzle in circular economy dialogue worldwide. And I wouldn't suggest for a moment that it's something that needs to be balanced more with technical materials. I do think that we are seeing students come to the table with those solutions, and they should be encouraged. But in the bigger scheme of things, I actually think that the bio side is underappreciated. So I would suggest that you take your solutions and make them as big as possible and shout as loud as possible about them.
And there could
Hear,
be
hear.
and there could be no better ending to our Judges Forum as our time is ending. And I thank you all very much for this important conversation. And I wish you all well in your future endeavors. And I thank you again for your competition and your time, and your judges for your wisdom and your guidance. And I wish you well. And I hope to see you again. Goodbye.
Bye.